if you're new to the page, welcome. And you may or may not know that both of our children, Carter and Tucker, both live with type 1 diabetes. So if you don't know what type 1 diabetes is, I'm really excited to tell you because I like to educate people on this subject. Type 1 and type 2 are very different. I got to stop leaning on the table because you guys are shaking. Type 1 and type 2 are very different. Type 2 is what 90% of people with type 1 diabetes have. Most people that you probably know have type 2 diabetes. This is one that's generally associated with diet, exercise, age, obesity. That's type 2. What our children have is type 1 diabetes. It's actually an autoimmune disease like MS or lupus. So their body's immune systems went into overdrive one day and decided to not stop and to destroy all of their beta cells in their pancreas, which are the ones that create insulin. So their bodies don't make insulin anymore. If you are unaware with your hormone biology, I guess, your insulin is what you use. So when you eat carbohydrates, any carbohydrate, whether it's like bread or fruit or candy, any carbohydrate you eat, your body utilizes it it takes the glucose out of the carbohydrate and uses that for energy. But your body needs insulin to unlock the cell to put that glucose in to utilize as energy. So if you don't have insulin, that glucose just bounces around in the bloodstream, in the system, causing all sorts of fun problems like long-term kidney disease, liver disease, eye disease, heart problems, all sorts of things associated with high blood sugar, so that glucose bouncing around in there. So you need insulin to open up the cell and put the glucose in so that your body can utilize that for energy. So that's kind of type 1 diabetes in a nutshell. Hey, Michelle. I love educating on type 1. Seriously, if you are brand new to type 1 diabetes and want to ask questions, I am like always an open book on this. I love, love, love when people want to know more, because the more people know, the less stigma there is. And there is, unfortunately, because of social media, or well, not just social media, but media in general, there's a lot of stigma surrounding type 1 diabetes because not a lot of people know that it is different than type 2. And so in the media, a lot of times you see people that say, oh, if you have all that candy, we're just giving you diabetes, or what do you get if you drink this giant Starbucks Frappuccino? Diabetes. Ha ha. It's not funny. It's not. My kids don't think it's funny. I don't think it's funny. Anybody with an autoimmune disease didn't pick this for themselves. They don't think it's funny. Okay, I'm off my soapbox. So that's kind of type 1 diabetes in a nutshell. So the way that our children get insulin then is artificially. They have an insulin pump. We used to do injections, but they have a pump that all of the calculations that we have put together are programmed in there, so they can input their blood sugar, input the number of carbs that they are eating, and then it will automatically calculate it and pump the insulin into their body. So on a regular day-to-day basis, we do have it kind of controlled. There is a lot of people will ask, like, is their diabetes under control? Is it brittle? That's not a thing either, by the way. Stop saying that. But it's not really ever controlled. They're children, so every time they grow or have a fit or don't get enough sleep or play sports or get sick, then their numbers go crazy. So that was kind of my point in talking about it today. Both of my children have been passing the flu back and forth since last Wednesday. Tucker got sick first and then Carter. And I know that when most kids have the flu, or when Tucker had the flu before diagnosis, it wasn't that big of a deal. It was like, oh, like, poor kid, he feels bad. He'll just hang out on the couch and maybe drink some ginger ale and, like, be cool, right? Like, we'll just chill out. My dog is snoring. He'll just hang out until it passes, right? With children with type 1 diabetes or adults with type 1 diabetes, because adults can get type 1 as well, as adults, there is a lot more work that goes into it. It's very much more dangerous. Blood sugars have to be checked every 2 hours around the clock, at least every 2 hours, because one of two things can happen and both things happened this week. So it's a great explanation. With Tucker, Because when you have the flu, and most of us wouldn't know this or it wouldn't matter. When you have the flu, your body doesn't absorb carbohydrates the same way as it usually does. And that actually lasts for about 2 weeks after you have the flu symptoms. So what that means is if Tucker's eating something with carbohydrates and he puts that into his pump and boluses, which is the term for giving insulin, if he boluses for that full amount, but his body's only absorbing half of it, now he's given himself too much insulin, and that's a very dangerous situation. His blood sugar can drop all the way low, he can lose consciousness, he can slip into a coma, and he can die. So we are checking every 2 hours to make sure, because there's no amazing calculation for this, right? It's not like your body absorbs it at half the rate or 35% of the rate or 75%. It's really a crapshoot. So we're guessing carbohydrates and insulin as best as we can with the knowledge that we have and the history over the last 24 hours. However, for example, with Tucker's example, at bedtime, he was completely in target. He had a yogurt. We bolused for half, 50% of the carbs of that. At midnight, he was within target blood sugar range. He was actually, I think, 7.6 or something, so a little bit even on the high side. And then by 3 o'clock, he was 2.8, which is dangerously low. 4.0 and under is low. 2.8 is getting to dangerous. If we did not have an alarm set, to check his blood, we would not, my husband's alarm was set, checked his blood, 2.8, gave him rocket candy to bring him back up, and then a snack on top of that to keep him up. If that scenario had not happened because we hadn't checked, then the very likelihood is that Tucker would have just continued dropping low until he just didn't wake up. And that's the reality that we live with every day. But was their reality last night, and it is worse when they're sick because of that absorption rate. The other side of things is that their blood sugar, thanks Michelle, I know you get it, when their blood sugar is high, obviously that has long-term effects, but also when your blood sugar is high because you don't have insulin or don't have enough insulin, it means that your body isn't using that glucose for energy, so your body will burn fat for energy. What the byproduct of that is ketones. I'm not going to get into keto diet and shit right now because there's so much science in there that some companies don't understand and some product people don't understand. But ketones are a byproduct produced from the body burning fat as energy because it can't use glucose for whatever reason. In Carter's situation, if there isn't enough insulin, so the body can't use the glucose to burn that, it's going to produce ketones. Ketones are very, very serious in diabetes. He can go into what's called diabetic ketoacidosis. That's the state he was in when he was diagnosed at age 15 months, and he almost died because your body's essentially going toxic. Your body fills up with those ketones and it goes toxic. When they're sick, they're not eating a ton of anything, let alone carbs. So now their body, whether their blood sugar is high or not, now their body is burning fat to stay alive during the day. Trying to get a child that is sick with the flu to eat anything is like trying to put a slippery fish into a sock. That was a terrible analogy, but you know what I'm saying. It's difficult. It's terrible. So we are constantly monitoring ketones in Carter. Today, he does have ketones. They're not at a dangerous rate yet. 4.0 and above is where we would rush him to the hospital. Right now, we're at just before supper, he was at 1.8. So we have to give extra insulin. Again, it's not like a cut and dry equation of how much insulin you give, especially when their blood sugar is in target, but they have ketones. And if you're a type 1 mom watching, you know how confusing that is in your brain. So that is another thing that we're watching for is ketones. Trying to force feed your child. I mean, if your kid is sick and doesn't have diabetes, as long as they're staying hydrated, you probably don't worry a lot about what they're eating. However, with this situation, we have to force feed some kind of carbs in that's not going to make them puke, not too much to make them puke again, but enough to keep the ketones at bay and not put them too high. And there's all these calculations that go into it. Dehydration concerns are a lot more severe with kids with type 1 diabetes. Carter, for example, and this I think I've discovered is just a Carter thing, but if he vomits once, he vomits like a million times in an hour. So hydration for him is really, really important, but more so he will dehydrate a lot quicker than the rest of us will. And so we have often ended up in the hospital, because he has been dehydrated and has ketones and all from the flu, the simple stomach flu. And so my point in sharing this today is to educate and to help raise awareness, because I know that a lot of people don't get it. Before Carter was diagnosed, I didn't get it. I had one kid I grew up with that had type 1, and I knew that he poked his finger and couldn't have sugar. That was my education. FYI, children with type 1, people with type 1 can have sugar. They can. Their insulin is brought on externally, whereas ours comes from the internal. So my point is to share awareness and to share education, because I am an open book, and I am, like I said earlier, I love to share this information, and I love to make sure that more people understand the differences between type 1 and type 2, and that more people understand that things are a little bit more complicated for individuals with type 1, not just kids, but like all ages with type 1 diabetes. Illness gets a lot more difficult. Travel has a lot more things to be considered. Sports a lot more difficult. There's even, like, as they get older, there's going to be other situations, drinking, partying, sexual activity. There's going to be all these different things, these concerns that our kids are going to have to deal with for their entire lives. And I want to share this, and I want to be open with this because our annual fundraising walk is coming up, and I will be sharing a lot more about it. And I will be asking people to reach into their hearts and share either my posts for awareness or share our page to help us raise fundraising, to join us in the walk to raise fundraising dollars. We've fundraised for the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, or JDRF, and all of the donations go towards the organization and towards funding a cure. JDRF has one of the highest dollars directly to research rates of any nonprofit in the country. I have been so blessed from working with JDRF, working as an employee with them for a number of years. I have been so blessed to get to meet some of these researchers and see some of the incredible research that is coming down the pipeline now. Would you even believe if I told you that 100 years ago, insulin was not a thing? So mothers that had children who were diagnosed would watch them die. That was the whole thing. Fuck. That was their whole reality. And then this amazing Canadian man developed this wonder drug, literally saving lives of hundreds of Canadians, and he did not patent it. He did not want it to be patented. He wanted it to be affordable to everybody. And now it's a drug that is administered around the world to keep people alive. 50 years ago, they didn't have insulin pumps. 50 years ago, they had to sharpen their needles, their insulin needles, because they were metal, and boil them because they were glass. We've come so far, and I can see the future of diabetes research, and it is amazing. And I truly believe that a functional cure is in our children's future, but it's not possible without fundraising dollars. And I am so passionate about that, and I will advocate for that until my last breath or until a cure is found. So I ask that you guys please share my videos and my posts on these subjects so that we can get more word out there and more information out there. Because the more that people know about this organization, the better. Like I said, there's less than 10% of people with people with diabetes that are type 1 in the world. So you can imagine what a small population of like awareness and advocacy we have. It's just us. It's just little us that we need help to spread the word about JDRF and about the funding, the fundraising opportunities for the research. So that's my end of my rambling for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. I see how many people are on, and I'm not like an emotional person. I never used to be. I keep saying that, but I am all the time now. It warms my heart a lot that you guys are watching this and give a shit. Honestly, that you care what our life is like, because it is very hard when you've been up for the 5th time in a row at night, not only dealing with a sick kid, but trying to do math and figure out how to keep your kid alive all night. It's hard to feel that alone. And it's nice to know that people gave a shit. So that's all. I'm going to go cry by myself now. Bye.